I love your setup, man. Look at that.
High in the Chilkat Mountains, Dustin and Wes are cleaning up the gold from the last 2 weeks.
Keep stacking it up, man. Every little bit counts.
Yeah, it does.
Beneath the roaring waters and jagged cliffs of Alaska's most unforgiving wilderness lies a place miners fear to tread, a place they call Death Canyon. For years, it has swallowed men whole, claimed machines, and shattered dreams. But against all odds, one man dares to conquer it. Dustin Hurt, the relentless treasure hunter, has done the unthinkable. In the shadow of deadly currents and collapsing rock, he has unearthed a staggering fortune, a $120 million jackpot pulled straight from Death Canyon itself. But how did he survive where others perished? What price did he pay to rip gold from the jaws of nature's deadliest trap? And perhaps most disturbing, what secrets still lurk beneath the black waters of the canyon? This is not just a story of gold. It is a story of obsession, danger, and survival. Before we descend into the heart of this terrifying discovery, make sure you subscribe and join us, because what you're about to witness is unlike anything ever seen in the gold rush. There are places in Alaska where nature does not simply test men, it devours them. And Death Canyon is one of those places, carved over millennia by violent torrents of ice and water. Its walls rise like jagged tombstones, closing in on the roaring river below. To the untrained eye, it is a canyon like any other. But to the men who have faced its wrath, it is something far more sinister, a labyrinth of hidden whirlpools, crushing currents, and falling rock, where the earth itself seems intent on swallowing those who dare intrude. The stories are whispered in mining camps, late at night, men dragged under in seconds, never seen again. Entire crews stranded when landslides cut off escape, machines broken in half, their remains rusting as grim reminders. The canyon is not just feared, it is respected, as though alive, guarding whatever secrets lie buried deep beneath its icy waters. But for Dustin Hurt, fear was never a reason to turn back. For him, Death Canyon was more than a deadly gorge. It was a challenge, a wall standing between him and untold wealth. And Dustin has always been a man who thrives on impossible odds. Some call it courage, others call it recklessness, but Dustin calls it destiny. Behind his determination lies more than just gold fever. It is ambition sharpened by years of living in his father's shadow. Dakota Fred Hurt, the legendary miner, carved his name into the gold rush by risking everything in the hunt for treasure. For Dustin, this canyon wasn't just about riches. It was about proving himself, proving that he was not just Fred's son, but a leader in his own right. The canyon, in many ways, became a battlefield not only against nature, but against legacy. Yet, in his relentless pursuit, Dustin pushed his crew to the brink. Bonds strained, trust frayed, and whispers of betrayal surfaced as men began questioning whether gold was worth their lives. Death Canyon had a way of exposing not only the fragility of rock, but the fragility of loyalty. Still, Dustin pressed forward, because for him, retreat meant defeat, not just in mining, but in life. And so, the battle lines were drawn, man against water, father against son's shadow, ambition against survival. The canyon waited in silence, its dark waters concealing either fortune or a grave. But obsession never sleeps, and Dustin was about to discover that Death Canyon does not give up its secrets without a fight. Next, we follow Dustin's relentless gamble, the moment when risk turned into obsession, and obsession became a matter of life and death. For most men, Death Canyon is the end of the line. Its currents shred confidence, its silence breaks courage, and its history warns against greed. But Dustin Hurt is not most men. Where others saw myth and misery, Dustin saw an opportunity so rare it demanded everything he had. He gambled his fortune, his reputation, his crew's loyalty, and his very life, on a belief that somewhere beneath the canyon's icy waters lay untouched veins of gold, veins that could rewrite his legacy forever. It was a gamble that tested not only his endurance, but his command as a leader. Each decision became a razor's edge. One wrong move could crush equipment, bankrupt the operation, or worse, claim a human life. The men who followed him knew the risks, but as the dangers mounted, so did the doubts. Was Dustin leading them to glory or dragging them toward disaster? The line between ambition and obsession blurred with every descent into the raging abyss. Divers plunged into waters cold enough to stop the human heart, their suits barely held against the numbing grip of the current. Rocks shifted overhead, collapsing without warning, threatening to bury them alive. Oxygen hoses tangled, ropes strained, and every second felt like playing chess with death. On the surface, Dustin watched with clenched fists, knowing each dive could be the last. The canyon demanded absolute control, yet it gave him nothing but chaos in return. But it wasn't only the canyon that pushed him, it was family. Dustin's father, Dakota Fred, had carved his reputation on bold risks and high-stakes treasure hunts. Dustin grew up under that shadow, torn between admiration and rebellion. Now, in the heart of Death Canyon, he was fighting not just to find gold, but to prove he could step out from behind his father's legacy and command respect on his own terms. That pressure, silent, unspoken, was as heavy as the rocks shifting beneath the diver's boots. And then, just when the canyon seemed unbeatable, a miracle surfaced. Specks of gold began to appear in the gravel, small at first, but undeniable. Against the crushing cold, against the canyon's fury, there was proof. Proof that the gamble might pay off. The men who once doubted were silent now, staring at their pans, realizing they were standing on the edge of something extraordinary. Yet this glimmer was only the beginning. Because with every speck of gold came a question that hung heavier than the water itself. How much deeper would they have to go to claim it? Next, we follow the first true signs of treasure. The moment when gold dust transformed into the promise of a jackpot, and hope began to eclipse fear inside Death Canyon. It always begins small. A faint sparkle in the shadows, a flicker of light where none should exist. For Dustin Hurt and his crew, it was a few golden specks clinging to the black canyon rock, tiny fragments that to outsiders would mean nothing. But for seasoned miners, those specks told a story. Gold doesn't scatter without reason. Dust is a signal, a whisper from the earth that something greater lies below, waiting for those daring or desperate enough to claim it. As the pans filled with more glitter, doubt gave way to awe. What started as a trickle became a stream, flakes growing larger, heavier, richer. Each swirl of the pan confirmed what Dustin had gambled his fortune and his life upon. Death Canyon was not barren. It was hiding something extraordinary. The silence that once pressed down like a curse broke under the clatter of shovels striking rock, the roar of pumps clearing gravel, and the desperate rush of men clawing at layers untouched for centuries. For the first time, hope eclipsed fear. The canyon's reputation as a watery tomb began to bend beneath the weight of possibility. Yet hope is dangerous. It blinds as much as it inspires. The deeper they dug, the more peril closed in. Collapsing banks threatened to bury progress. Ropes strained under relentless currents. Machines groaned, battered against the canyon's merciless grip. The gold was real, but the canyon would not surrender it without a fight. Among the crew, tension simmered. Men who had once questioned Dustin's obsession now hung on each nugget pulled from the gravel. Their faith shifted, not entirely toward loyalty, but toward greed. Gold has a way of changing men, making allies into rivals and loyalty into something far more fragile. Dustin felt it, a crack forming within the ranks. Was his crew following him out of trust or out of hunger for what lay beneath their boots? And through it all, the shadow of family loomed. Dustin could almost hear his father's voice. "This is how legends are made, son." But legends don't come cheap. Every shovel of dirt carried the weight of risk, every nugget a reminder that the line between glory and ruin was razor thin. Still, the promise was too great to ignore. They were standing on the edge of something vast, perhaps even history itself. Yet, the canyon was not finished testing them, because with each glittering discovery, the earth seemed to tighten its grip, preparing to unleash its fury. And soon, Death Canyon would strike back, harder than ever before. The canyon does not give up its secrets easily. The moment Dustin Hurt's crew began pulling more than dust from the depths, the land itself seemed to awaken. As if furious at the intrusion, Death Canyon struck back. Rock slides crashed without warning, walls of stone collapsing into the water with the sound of thunder. Men scrambled for their lives, trapped between jagged cliffs and a torrent that seemed determined to grind them into oblivion. Ropes snapped like brittle twigs, dragging divers into currents so powerful they could rip a man from his harness in seconds. Machines groaned, choked, and stalled as if the canyon itself conspired to tear the operation apart. Each minute stretched into a gamble with fate, where one wrong step meant death. For every ounce of gold wrestled from the gravel, the canyon demanded a toll of blood, sweat, and near sacrifice. Whispers began to ripple through the crew, dark rumors that they had stirred something ancient, something not meant to be unearthed. Men swore they heard voices in the rushing water, felt unseen hands tugging at their gear, watched shadows move against the canyon walls where no human stood. To them, this was more than danger. It was a curse, one that would not allow its riches to be stolen without consequence. And yet retreat was never an option. Dustin had staked too much, his money, his pride, his very identity, on breaking the canyon's grip. To pull back now would not just mean failure, it would mean humiliation, surrender, and the loss of everything he had fought to prove. The tension within his crew grew thicker with every collapse. Some men wanted out, others wanted more. Loyalty fractured as ambition collided with fear. Dustin's authority was tested at every turn, forcing him to balance power, persuasion, and desperation just to keep his team from imploding. Still, the gold was there. It shimmered just beneath the surface, calling them deeper, darker, into places no miner had dared to go. The canyon pushed harder, the men pushed back, and the fragile line between victory and disaster grew thinner by the day. Dustin knew the risks. He knew that each step forward invited another strike from the canyon's fury. But ambition has a voice louder than fear. And so they dug, and they dove, convinced that something extraordinary still waited below. What they found next would silence every doubt and ignite a frenzy unlike anything seen before. The canyon's ultimate prize, a jackpot beyond imagination. After weeks of torment, when it seemed the canyon would crush every dream, it finally yielded. Buried beneath shifting gravel and raging waters, Dustin Hurt's crew struck something no miner alive had ever imagined. At first, it was a glimmer, then a torrent. Nuggets, not specks, began to surface. Some were the size of pebbles, others were as large as fists. Each one pulled from the abyss shimmered with the weight of a fortune. The moment was surreal. Men who had faced death in that canyon stood frozen, silent. Rough hands, scarred and battered, trembled as they held destiny itself. The gold they had risked everything for was real, so real it seemed almost impossible. Hardened miners who had spent decades chasing elusive promises now found themselves standing in the middle of a dream come true. When the tally came, the number was staggering. Over $120 million in gold, ripped from the jaws of Death Canyon. A jackpot that eclipsed not only every risk they had taken, but every doubt, every betrayal, every whispered curse. For Dustin, it was more than victory. It was vindication, proof that he could carve his own legend, one that could stand alongside or even overshadow the shadow of his father's legacy. But glory rarely comes without a price. As the gold piled higher, so did the unease. Men began to glance at each other differently. Was this a brotherhood still bound by trust, or a fragile alliance held together only by greed? In the glow of newfound wealth, ambition hardened, suspicion grew, and the canyon's silence seemed to echo with a warning. Nothing this valuable comes free. Dustin, for all his triumph, felt the weight pressing down. Yes, they had beaten the canyon. Yes, they had pulled its treasure into the light. But in his heart, he knew something darker lingered. This canyon did not surrender without reason. For every fortune it gave, it demanded something in return. And so the question haunted every man who touched that gold. Was it truly a blessing, the kind of miracle men dream of and never see? Or was it a curse, an omen that what they had awakened would follow them long after they left its depths? Next, we uncover the true cost of riches, the sacrifices, scars, and shadows that came with Dustin's triumph, and the chilling reminder that in Death Canyon, nothing is ever truly free. Wealth beyond imagination often arrives hand in hand with shadows. For Dustin Hurt, the $120 million fortune pulled from Death Canyon was proof of his triumph. But in the glow of victory came a chill that no gold could warm. The canyon had already claimed its price. Near-fatal accidents, shattered machines, and men left scarred in body and spirit. Triumph and tragedy stood side by side, each nugget of gold weighed down with the memory of how close they had come to never leaving alive. Whispers spread through camp like smoke. Some swore they heard voices echoing in the canyon at night, low and restless, as though the very rocks resented their intrusion. Others saw shadows moving against the walls where no man stood, or felt hands pulling at their suits while they dove. To skeptics, it was exhaustion, paranoia, the toll of long days in merciless waters. But to those who believed, it was something darker, something that suggested they hadn't just found treasure, they had stolen from a graveyard of lost souls. The weight of suspicion began to tear at the crew. Men who once cheered each golden haul now eyed each other with doubt. Was the fortune they carried out of the canyon a blessing or a curse that would follow them forever? Gold has a way of bending loyalty, of turning allies into rivals, and Dustin could feel it. His leadership was tested like never before, caught between ambition, reward, and the haunting price that came with it. And then came the final reminder that Death Canyon never lets go. As they prepared to leave, accidents struck again. equipment failing without reason, ropes fraying at the worst possible moment, and one final landslide that nearly buried their camp. To some, it was coincidence. To others, vengeance. Either way, the canyon sent its message clearly. Its riches were never meant to be taken lightly. For Dustin, the triumph was real, but so was the burden. He had won the jackpot, carved his own legend, and silenced every doubt that shadowed his name. Yet he carried with him scars, both visible and hidden, that gold could never erase. And as the dust settled and the bags of fortune were sealed, a chilling question lingered. What would the legacy of Death Canyon truly be? Next, we confront the haunting legacy of fear and fortune, the story of how Dustin's triumph became legend, and why the canyon's silence still chills those who dare to dream of gold. Dustin Hurt's strike in Death Canyon will be remembered as one of the boldest, most dangerous feats in modern mining history. To pull $120 million in gold from a place where men had vanished, where machines had failed, and where nature itself seemed determined to kill, was nothing short of extraordinary. It was more than a jackpot. It was a battle against the impossible, a fight that fused ambition with obsession and carved Dustin's name into the unforgiving bedrock of legend. Yet legends are not made by gold alone. They are forged by the scars that never fade. Every man who descended into that canyon carried out more than treasure. He carried memories of close calls, of comrades nearly lost, of moments when survival hung by a thread. Victory was undeniable, but so were the costs. For some, the price was fear that still clung long after the machines were shut down. For others, it was the haunting suspicion that they had crossed a forbidden line, ripped something sacred from a place that was never meant to be disturbed. Dustin, too, carries that weight. For him, the strike was more than money. It was vindication against those who doubted him, proof that he could carve a path outside the shadow of his father's legend. But even in triumph, he knows the truth. The canyon gave, and the canyon took. It demanded loyalty, tested bonds, and sowed division. Power, ambition, and betrayal had all played their roles. The gold glitters in the records, yes, but the story of Death Canyon is as much about survival as it is about fortune. And now, the canyon rests once more. Its waters roar, its walls stand silent, guarding whatever secrets remain in its depths. But history tells us that silence never lasts. The lure of fortune is eternal, and the story of Dustin's strike will call others. New miners, new dreamers, new challengers who believe they too can tame the canyon and claim its hidden prize. But here lies the chilling question. Will they find fortune? Or will they awaken the same fury that nearly buried Dustin Hurt and his men? Because Death Canyon is not done. Its silence is only a pause. And somewhere in those dark waters, the next chapter of fear and fortune is already waiting to be written.